have conversations about race and racism fairly frequently, which may be rather unusual for most organizations. But one of the things, a part of the conversation that I see is missing is the other side of racism. So it's like talking about global warming without talking about how global warming comes about. So in this class, we look at how it is that white privilege and has been institutionalized and embedded in our public and social everyday lives, and so that we can understand the system of racism that we currently live in. What we want most of all, because this is an educational institution, is we want people to think. And we want people to walk away perhaps with a critical insight or a perspective that they didn't have before. We hope that sparks their curiosity and that they take classes where they can learn more, or they have conversation with their loved ones, and, so that they too can benefit from this. And it's also, the other objective is that students need to not just learn, but they need to know how to articulate their learning publicly in casual, informal forums. And so this is one of the ways that students learn to talk about difficult topics in a non-combative way.
So our board is basically on how systematic racism in healthcare affects people of color and minorities. So what we tried to cover was the history of the United States, beginning with slavery and how originally African Americans were used for medical testing and basically had no health care, to all the way down to events like Tuskegee and the Civil Rights Movement. And so, but even though with the Civil Rights Movement and governmental policies like the Health Care Act in 1996 and Obamacare, racism in healthcare still remains a big problem. So that's what we're trying to explain through using examples of how discrimination deters minorities from receiving the health care that they want, or environmental racism that causes them to be sick, like cancer and different congenital diseases and everything. So that's basically what we're trying to cover and trying to explain to people that it does exist.
So our project is about No Child Left Behind, and we did it to show the inequalities that still reside in our educational system. We have a beautiful board here that describes some of our definitions. If a school has certain key subgroups, and usually the key subgroups are low socioeconomic, racial and ethnic groups, students with disabilities, and English language learners. When a school has a certain level of these subgroups, they have to make certain AYP standards. AYP is adequate yearly progress.
And that means that they fall under corrective action, and from there, an improvement, and from there, the teacher has to teach to a specific curriculum, which actually narrows the curriculum, and it doesn't really cater to the individual student. Now the teachers have to teach more in a way to be able to pass these general standards in order to make improvement. And even if the teachers or the schools are making yearly improvement, they're still labeled as like corrective action and need improvement. And what happens a lot of the times is a lot of these kids that come in, English is their second language as well, they speak Spanish, and they come in maybe say at the third grade level, and when they have to narrow the curriculum, we're not teaching to help these kids out as well, and a lot of these teachers aren't bilingual, and we're from like kindergarten to third grade, you're expected to already know like your numbers. And
so what happens also is when schools fall under an improvement, a lot of times No Child Left Behind expects the parents to be able to help. And the problem with this is a lot of parents aren't able to, because all of the curriculum is in English, and it doesn't account for the fact that there's students out there that don't have a family background of English speakers. So it really affects the students' ability to have help with their homework, and it really places them at a disadvantage.
A lot of times when people talk about the First Amendment, they like to talk about their freedom of expression, their freedom of speech. And oftentimes when we talk about regulating speech, people get all up in arms, they get all pissed off, if we regulate speech, what's going to be next? But our whole argument is that hate speech isn't neutral, and that oftentimes hate speech targets minority groups and oftentimes women, and how it creates a hostile environment, and And a lot of this information talks about hate speech has actually gone up on college campuses, and how the hostile environment that it creates makes it so minority groups actually have lower GPAs, and they oftentimes are plagued with stress and depression because they don't want to come on campus. They don't even want to go to school. And so our other argument and point is that when you look at different identities, like racial identities, how many racist terms can you think of? Many, right? How many can you think of for white people? 2? What are they? Cracker. And I don't even feel bad saying that out loud. Cracker. You know, like, and so that's kind of like the whole idea too, that even in racist hate speech, you know, white people, what are the terms for them? Cracker. Like, we don't even feel bad saying it out loud and saying that term in our conversation because it holds no weight. There's no weight to it. Whereas other racist terms, we don't even feel comfortable saying. You know what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay. So we also have a petition, and our petition is just urging President Haynes to actually enforce regulation on hate speech. Actually, all the pictures that you see around our poster board and are actual like vandalism of hate speech that happened on our campus. We also have pictures of the koala and different racial terms and stuff that they used. And the whole reason why they were allowed to say that is because their First Amendment. So we want to protect our students, and we believe in freedom of speech and regulation.
All right, so we're doing whiteface and comedy. We felt like whiteface and comedy would be a good way to expose like white privilege and white domination because it's a good way, it's a lighthearted way to bring up race without it being too offensive. So what we did here is we have this race game. This race game is to just get you thinking about what whiteness is. Many of these people on here, they're either mixed. This man down here, he looks like he could be Irish, he could be white. He's actually a Mexican boxer. I wanted to let people know that whiteness is like kind of this invisibility. Like it's people don't quite, they know what it is, but they don't quite know what it is. They can't put a finger on it because it is tied to nationality. It's tied to culture. It's tied to your social class. So we wanted to get people to get thinking about what whiteness is. Here we have blackface versus whiteface. We needed to explain. There's a long history of white performers portraying minority groups in negative light. So with like blackface, they don on blackface paint. They make stereotypes of these other people that really stick. The main difference between blackface, yellowface, redface, these portrayals of minority groups versus whiteface is we see that whiteface is it's exposing the superiority, the privilege, the domination that maybe that white people have that minorities don't have. Much of the time with blackface and yellowface, the joke comes at the minority's skin color, whereas the juxtaposition of whiteface is like we understand how whiteness has been constructed, we understand how blackness has been constructed. So the joke comes where it's like it's uncomfortable to see these people in strange situations. So with like Ollie G, we see a character he's a Jewish performer. He's not obviously not all people that are white we consider white now were considered white back in the day. So Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, Jewish people, they were all like deemed not white. They were deemed minority or minorities. So Sacha Baron Cohen, he's a Jewish performer pretending to be a privileged white person, and we see him assimilating and straying away from white culture, which was what so many immigrants had to do at first. We just say it's a good way to expose the privilege. I mean, I just start like I'm repeating myself now. With white chicks, it does this so much more, as we see with the movie White Chicks. With these pictures right here, we see how we think like how blackness would be constructed and how a black person would react. The picture right under it is how they corrected themselves and they act like how a white person would be. It just exposes, what that movie's really exposing is this idea of how whiteness has been constructed through media.
Whiteness to me is basically something that we don't really notice all the time.
It's something that is perpetuated through the use of stereotypes, just daily language, things like that, that when you think deeper about these stereotypes, you're kind of bringing up white people at the same time. That's kind of what our project had to do with. We talked about how racial stereotypes perpetuate white hegemony. So basically when you're saying something such as a black person is lazy, you're comparing that to something of the norm, which is white people. So when you say black people are lazy, that must mean that white people are productive. So we try to challenge people who come to our station to think deeply about these words that are used in daily life, and we just want people to kind of be more conscious of what they're talking about and really what's happening when they're using these terms in their daily language. Just really want people to think about this and how whiteness is so present in our society and really dominating over everybody in every group, because it's grouping everybody together when really we should be thinking of everybody as an individual.
Okay. Growing up, I've always noticed race, not specifically the white race. I've always noticed like the black race and the Asian race, because I'm half black, half Filipino, and I had to navigate my identity as such, because I don't identify as a black man because I don't fit the mold of a black man, the stereotypical images of the urban, heteromasculine, like that image. I don't fit that. So I was denied that identity or that group affiliation. And so I sought affiliation with like the Filipinos, and I was shut out from that group as well because I was too black to be Filipino. And so with that, like race was apparent to me, and this was in middle school. So what whiteness means to me is like I kind of fully understand how whiteness affects minorities. Blackness is treated as the bottom of the social hierarchy, and whiteness is treated at top. So like my dark complexion, aesthetic is not placed on it. Like images in the media is always placed, the aesthetic is placed on the white racial class. And analyzing media, you notice that minorities are always treated as like comedy. They're treated as like, they're usually stereotypes and they're treated as comedy, nothing serious. And when they're treated as serious, they're either like the bad guy or something bad. Like there are rarely any good role models of minorities in media. And if you can name like examples to that, then that is racist. And you notice that. If you could count the number of people that you could think of that are positive role models for minorities, then that's racist. Because there's not enough then. And you're placing race on your finger. They're a statistic, or it's a status quo in a sense. Yeah. So that's what whiteness means to me. Like I'm not against the white race. I just notice how white supremacy and white privilege is prevalent in society and how that affects minorities. And that's where I'm coming from. That's what I'm speaking about.